history of the Bahamas is very, very interesting. Very interesting. It is interesting for the fact that the Bahamas is an archipelago of about 700 islands and over 2,000 limestone rocks and cays, spread over 5,382 square miles, with a total population of about 358,600 people. Now, out of that figure, we have about 65% of that figure that lives, works, and resides right here on this island. This being one of the most developed islands, it's also the capital city of the entire country. The second largest inhabited island is Grand Bahama. Grand Bahama is the nation's second city, and Grand Bahama has approximately some 45,000 Bahamians. The third largest inhabited island is Abaco. Abaco is the nation's third city, and Abaco has approximately some 18,000 Bahamians. The islands in the southern part of the country, their populations are very small. Some of the southern islands only have about 1,000 people. Some of the settlements, which are very small communities within those southern islands, only have as much as about 50 people. We have three major industries that drives our economy here in the Bahamas. The first one is tourism, the second one is banking and financial services, and the third one is agriculture and fishing and light manufacturing. We also have three basic standards of living. We have the rich, the middle class, and the poor. The good thing is, the rich and the poor are in the minorities, but the majority of Bahamians are middle class. You can use American currency while vacationing here in the Bahamas, but we have our own Bahamian currency. The Bahamian currency and the American currency has the same value. $1 American is equivalent to $1 Bahamian. Okay? Alright, let me just take a left right here. This is Bay Street. This is the main thoroughfare downtown Nassau. We have some of our major designer products here, major names here in downtown Nassau. But first I'd like to explain some of these historical buildings here to my right. In the Bahamas, we have three different branches of government. We have the executive branch, which consists of the cabinet. We have the legislative branch, which consists of our two houses of parliament. And then there's the judiciary. These buildings represents the legislative branch of government here in the Bahamas. We have, to my far right, we have a parliament. We have 38 members of parliament who are elected from over 38 constituencies, who meet in this very same building here to my far right every Wednesday to discuss laws and pass policies governing the country. The building in the middle is our Senate building. The Senate is the upper house, the parliament is the lower house. The Bahamas is dominated by two major political parties, the center-left Progressive Liberal Party and the center-right Free National Movement. We have had third parties forming throughout our history, but they were never able to win a general elections. Okay? The statue in the middle is the statue of Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria inherited the British throne at the age of 18 years old in the year of 1837. One of her very first acts as Queen of the British Empire was the abolition of slavery the very next year. Queen Victoria signed the Emancipation Proclamation abolishing slavery in the British Empire on the 12th of August, 1838. Out of the kind generosities of the freed slaves in the Bahamas, wanting to do something to say thank you to Victoria, they donated funds to have that statue erected to commemorate Queen Victoria. Today, Queen Victoria is the longest serving British monarch in the history of the empire. She served a total of 64 years. Okay? And that statue was placed there following her death in 1901. Now, this area here to my left, this is what we call Rawson Square. This was named in honor of our 1860s governor from England. His name is R. Rawson. In the middle of Rawson Square, there is a statue of our first Bahamian Governor General. His name is Samilo Bertram Butler. Samilo Butler became Governor General of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas upon attaining independence from the British. The Bahamas became an independent country July 10, 1973. And there is a statue of our first Bahamian Governor General, Samilo Butler. Okay? Alright, we're going to be moving right along. Now, in the Bahamas, I know in America your senators are elected. Well, in the Bahamas, our senators are not elected. They are appointed. The majority of our senators are appointed on the advice of the Prime Minister, who would then have a majority in the lower house, which is Parliament, and the minority of our senators are appointed by the leader of the opposition, who will have the least amount of seats in the House. The balance of power that exists in the House is supposed to be reflected within the Senate. Because the governing party has a majority in the House, the lower house, the Constitution gives them a right to appoint the majority of senators to serve in the upper house. This building here to my left is the Churchill Building, named in honor of former Prime Minister Sir Winston Churchill. That building was renovated and expanded on the site of a few older buildings, originally known as the Malcolm Building, but was renovated and expanded and opened up there on that site in the early 1960s as the Churchill Building. On the second floor of the Churchill Building housed the Cabinet Office of the Bahamas. Cabinet is the executive branch of government here in the Bahamas. Okay? The chairman of cabinet usually, or is in most cases, always the Prime Minister. Prime Minister gets to select cabinet ministers and members of Parliament. Well, not members of Parliament, but cabinet ministers. Okay? Alright. Okay, so elections in the Bahamas is held every 5 years. Okay? The Bahamas today is what you call a constitutional monarch, where we recognize the monarch of England, who is Queen Elizabeth, as the figurehead of government in the Bahamas. She is represented by a governor who is recommended to her on the advice of the Prime Minister. She gets to appoint that individual who conducts all of her that individual will conduct all the Queen's rule here in the Bahamas, which is basically ceremonial, where she entertains government officials and diplomats from other countries at Government House. And she also conducts swearing-in ceremonies of persons who are appointed to serve the government in different capacities. Okay, so the Bahamas is what you call a constitutional monarch. Okay, just like Canada, where we still recognize the monarch of England as the figurehead of government. Okay.
Jermaine, how long do the senators serve? What's their term?
Well, you see, the life of a senator is actually the life of a government. The government is elected for a 5-year term.
It's 5 years.
Yes. Now, what usually happens after the 5-year term is expired, the Prime Minister will advise the government, the Governor General, and that the Governor General will prorogue Parliament, and they will set a date for elections. Okay? So once Parliament is prorogued, that means all members of Parliament will become seatless. All senators will become seatless.
Every 5 years.
Every 5 years. Then what usually happens after that, once a date, they would set an election date. Well, of course you would know an election date would have already been set. And once that date occurs, whatever political party wins the majority of seats throughout the constituencies, let's say if the FNM or the PLP wins the majority of constituencies, the leader of the party in those cases automatically becomes Prime Minister. Okay? So let's just say the Progressive Liberal Party and the PLP and the FNM, like in the last election, the Progressive Liberal Party won 30 seats. The opposition party won 8 seats. Automatically, the leader of the Progressive Liberal Party, he becomes Prime Minister. Okay? And the Constitution gave him a right to appoint the majority of senators to serve in the upper house as well. Okay? So if the governing party will get to probably appoint probably 9 senators, the opposition will probably get to appoint 6 senators. The Governor General, I think, appoints 2 independent senators, and I think that's together the governing party and the opposition need to appoint 1 individual, and they would agree on that person as well.
So the senators don't run as individuals?
No, they don't run like how they run in the United States.
They're appointed.
Most of them are appointed. So you see, the idea of a government shutdown here in the Bahamas is really almost impossible. It's likely, it could happen, depending on the balance of power that exists in the lower house. But the idea of a government shutdown in the Bahamas is really almost impossible, because the government or the governing party of that day will control both houses.
Yeah.
It is not like in the case where in America, where you have Republicans control the House, the Democrats control the Senate.
Right.
Nothing really gets done good like that. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, a governing party is elected for 5 years, all right, in the Bahamas. The governing party has a right to bring forth their plans and their policies within that 5 years. After that 5 years is expired, they go back to the people for a fresh mandate. If the people say yay, they get elected again. If the people say nay, they get fired. You see what I'm saying? So really, what I'm really trying to say is the way of our parliamentary procedures is that the governing party and their policies have a right to really take shape. Really. Now, if they fail on some of their plans, if they fail to implement some of their promises, the Bahamian people could hold them in the balance and say, look, you promise us this, you promise us that, you promise us this thing, and you ain't deliver. So why should we vote for you again? You understand what I'm saying?
So when did all this start? When did this government start?
Well, this is the British, our government is based on the British system of government, where we have elections every 5 years, although in England they have elections every 4 years. But in terms of ministerial government and party politics in the Bahamas, really the beginning of that era starts between like around 1950s, thereabout.
So it's fairly young.
It is a young system, but we have had parliament in the Bahamas from as far back as 1729. But over the years, the Constitution of the Bahamas was amended to give the local Bahamian people more autonomy to govern themselves. Okay? One time ago, it wasn't always like this. We had a system where you had the British was basically in control of everything. But over the years, they start to give the locals more autonomy to create more policies and to make decisions on their own behalf. All right. I think the Constitution was really the Constitution was amended in 1962 for the first time, giving women the right to vote. Because prior to 1962, women couldn't vote in the Bahamas. All right. And then 1964, I think it was the Constitution was amended again, introducing this ministerial government, where the premier could appoint cabinet ministers. You know what I mean by cabinet ministers? He get to appoint a minister of finance, a minister of education, a minister of health, a minister. That's what we call ministerial government. And the Constitution was amended to pave the way for ministerial government here in 1964. All right, and that also ushered in a new political era in the country, where the country could have even make a move to try to get independence after that. All right. But the first political party in the Bahamas was started in 1953. That was the Progressive Liberal Party. The Progressive Liberal Party at that time was a party of the grassroots Bahamians. At that time in the 1950s, we were not always a unified country. We had a lot of social problems in the country. We had segregation in the country to a certain extent as well. We had all sorts of things going on in the country, and all of that the people of the country wanted to play a more active role in what's going on in the policy decision making of the country. Okay, so the Progressive Liberal Party was the political engine that kind of steered and changed the political future of the country, where it was recognized as the party for the grassroots people. All right. But they were not the government. In fact, at that time in 1957, I don't even think they had a seat in Parliament in 1953. I don't know whether they had a seat. But anyway, as a result of the formation of the Progressive Liberal Party, another political party was born, which was known as the United Bahamian Party, which consists of the merchant class people, the people who were in control of big business in the country. They formed themselves into what you call the United Bahamian Party. I just want to show you this beautiful building here to my right. This is what we call the police headquarters. This is where the Commissioner of Police has his office. His name is Mr. Ellison Greenslade. Okay?
As we're driving around, you may need to tell us the things that you see.
Yes, I will. I will, but it's just so much I have to tell you right in this area here. You understand what I'm saying? But I definitely will be pointing out and explaining all the historical landmarks as we go along. Okay? But I just trying to squeeze it in right here because there's so much things for me to tell you right here. Right in the same vicinity, we'll be driving up. We'll have a lot of time to share a lot of information to you. Now we're coming into the historical fort. This is known as Fort Fincastle and the Queen's Staircase. This fort was built in anticipation of a French invasion. It was believed by King George III Napoleon of France is going to come here and capture this colony away from the British. The British built this fort as well as two other existing forts in the event of a conflict with the French. Okay, now, once the tour of the fort is complete, you can walk right here. I will be waiting on you. We will meet on top of the Queen's Staircase where I will be waiting on you and Philip will explain the history of the Queen's Staircase to you. Okay? Is that okay?
Sounds good.
All right. Now, to my left, we have the water tower. This water tower was built in 1928 as a water storage for this section of the island. The water tower stands at some 216 feet above sea level, thereby making it the highest point of elevation on the island. This fort was built in anticipation of a French invasion. It was built to protect the western entrance of the harbor, whereas it took 600 slaves who were boarded from West Africa, who work a total of 18 hours a day with hammers and chisels, chiseling out this entire fort area out of a big massive rock. This fort, shaped like a old paddle wheel steamer ship, was built, designed like a ship by the British, so that people who are approaching the harbor, if they were to see this, they would actually think this is a ship rather than a fort until they are fired upon. Okay? However, the British had defeated the French in the Battle of the Nile even before Napoleon had a chance to set sail this way. Basically, these forts never really saw any action, but were used as a signal tower for the cruise ships coming into port. Okay? There'll be somebody to take you on a full tour of the fort. Once the tour of the fort is complete, we'll meet on top of the Queen's Staircase. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right, I will await on you on top of the Queen's Staircase. Thank you very much.